My involvement in the book was to look at the role plays, to help edit the role plays from previous years, and then to issue a commentary from a mediation perspective, a mediator's perspective, on how the problems in the role plays would probably unfold in real life. I've tried as far as possible to link it to what would happen, not just in the competition, but if it was a real mediation happening in a commercial setting. And I've done that for each of the 21 role plays, and there's a one-page commentary following each role play.
And my involvement in the book was, of course, with Colin to select the role plays and edit them. And I also added a commentary to each role play, which was focused not so much on what would happen in the mediation in real life, but how the role play might be used in training. Selecting one feature of training, one value in training that each one might offer. Selective. I mean, good trainers will find many ways to use these role plays because they're very rich, but I make one proposal in a comment.
I learnt that some of the role plays, even though they had been used in the competition, had some inconsistencies in them, which were probably dealt with at the time by student queries. So one of the things is we had to iron those out and make sure, for example, that in the general information we included information that would be known to both parties. There were some instances where when we looked at the role play anew, we found out that there was information in the confidential information of one party which should have been known by both parties in the dispute. And I also learnt that these role plays are incredibly well written as a whole, and many of the really subtle points don't come out in the competition because of shortage of time. So many of these role plays can be used over a long duration, possibly half a day or even a day, because it would be useful to get to a settlement agreement at the end and for that to be signed. And we don't have time in the mediation competition to do that. But it's there. These role plays can be used to really train people to understand what mediation is about and how it can be used as a very useful tool to resolve to resolve problems in mediation, disputes in mediation.
Well, there are 21 role plays in this book, and each of them features a scenario in which we have a mediator, a client or a business person, and their counsel. And they are, as Colin just said, they're rich enough that you could use them in training for a full day or even longer. So I would say you could use each one of them between 2 hours and a full day, 2 days. Each one has general information and confidential information for each of the parties. So the target group is training in general. I would say training at universities, training in private institutions, including also training for preparation for future ICC Commercial Mediation Competitions, and training for mediators, training for business students or business people who want to learn how to represent themselves well in mediation, and training for lawyers, training in representation at mediation. So there's a rich variety of uses this book could be used for, but in general it's for training. They're very, very realistic simulations which offer very complex and interesting range of issues that you could use in training.
What makes this book unique, I think, is that I don't know of any other book that's available in the market which has so many well-written and complex, realistic role plays. So I think that's one factor. The other factor is the commentaries that Greg and myself have added from a mediator's perspective, and from a training perspective. That really does help the people who are teaching mediation to understand the role play in a little more detail and how it might pan out. These role plays will have a variety of different solutions. Sometimes they end up in effectively a divorce where the parties go their own way. Other times they end up in a joint venture agreement where the parties decide that it's better to cooperate with each other in the long term rather than argue over something. Many of them have long-term relationships, and the mediation preservative. So this is an incredibly unique resource that people can use to understand mediation better and how it is used in realistic situations.
I agree with everything Colin just said, but what makes this unique beyond that is that these role plays have been written by practitioners, people who really mediate in international commercial disputes, and so they are based on experience. They're fictional, but they're based on the experience of really well-established professionals in the field. They're not purely academic. They have a very real feel to them, and that makes this book very unique because I don't know of another book like that. In addition, there's a copyright provision within the book which enables institutions to make limited use of this book in photocopying, and so it can be used in training really effectively. That's another feature which makes this book unique and certainly adds value to whoever wants to buy it.